and welcome back to Vox Popcast, the weekly pseudo-academic roundtable of pop culture analysis with drinking and swearing. My name is Christopher Maverick, but you can call me Mav, and I am once again here with my co-hosts, Katya and Wayne. How's it going, guys?
Mav. Dragging a little bit. I got my second vaccine shot this week. I was
yay.
Yeah, I was good for like the first day and a half, and then like hour 33, I came home. I took a short nap. I crawled out from under the covers. I stood up and immediately started shivering, and then kind of fought body fevers and whatever for the next several hours. So today I'm dragging, but the fever part seems to be gone.
Oh no, that's normal. That's just when the our overlords tap into the chip in the vaccine to monitor your movement. That's totally normal.
And that's when everything got uploaded.
Yeah, no, that's totally normal. That's just they're fixing the interface soon. But
I wonder if we'll pick up listeners who are like, "Ooh, they believe."
Oh god. Well, I get my first shot next week, which I'm super excited about.
Oh, okay. So you're do not skip the Vita-Ray treatment. Vita-Rays are important. That's why I'm okay and Wayne's not.
Vita-Rays are very important. Got it. We'll definitely.
Vita-Rays are what make you, when you take the super soldier serum. Vita-Rays are what turn you into Captain America and not into a crazy person. That is that is comic book canon, and actually sort of kind of transition to what we're doing today.
Good segue.
Thank you. So we're doing Falcon and Winter Soldier today because it is a big cultural event in the MCU, and contractually we just have to cover those on this show apparently, and also because everybody's talking about it, and because I like the show a lot. What did you guys think?
Like you said, I liked it a lot. Yeah,
it was. I mean,
six episodes in and out. 5 of them I thought were really good quality. So
it was all right. Like, is it my favorite TV show of all time? No. Did I enjoy it?
Yeah. Well, so we invited 2 returning guests today for today's show, and get right to it. So welcoming back first, we got Marcel Walker. Hey, Marcel.
Hey guys, how are you?
Doing good. Are you also COVID dying or COVID shot processing or whatever Wayne said?
I got shot number 2 yesterday, so I'm actually pretty good. I woke up just a little discombobulated today. Not like I actually had to ask myself, am I feeling after effects or am I just tired? But no, it's all good. Yeah.
All right. Well, welcome back. You also enjoyed the show, I assume.
I did. It's particularly that last episode, that was.
Okay. Well, that's because that was my least favorite. So it means we'll have an interesting conversation.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. I did enjoy the show. It's just that we'll talk about it because I also want to introduce our other guest first. Welcoming back to the show. This is only your second time on the show, but Anthony Kingdom James Ruttgaizer. You have too many names. How's it going, man?
It's going good. Is it second or third?
You might have been. I don't know. I thought you were only on once before.
I think it's third.
You would have been doing this for 3 years. You could have been on like a dozen times, and we wouldn't remember.
We need to keep like score somewhere. People give us stickers, And then when you've been on your 100th episode, you get like a little prize pack.
I just want to join the five-time host club, like Saturday Night Live. I want the velvet smoking jacket.
I so want a 5-timers. I want to. Do people know what we're talking about?
I hope so.
There's a gimmick on Saturday Night Live. It was a joke the first time. I can't remember who the first person who did it was, but like I think it was Tom Hanks or something on his 5th hosting, and he made this joke about how when you host the 5th time, you get to join the exclusive 5-timers club, and then Steve Martin, who has hosted a bajillion times, came out and gave him the smoking jacket, and they went to the secret room where they were like sipping cognac and stuff, and then it's just become a thing that they actually do now. It was clearly a joke the first time, but now it's like this very prestigious thing that like people get excited and they get their 5-timers jacket.
The first time it was Hanks with Steve Martin, Elliot Gould of all people, who probably hadn't hosted in at least a decade, and Paul Simon. I know John Lovitz was the waiter.
Okay.
And Ralph Nader was in there. Anyways. But
now we've taken this obscure reference and just made it even weirder.
It's fantastic.
Kingdom, what'd you think of Falcon Winter Soldier?
Loved it. Especially happy with the Isaiah Bradley appearances. I even did a commentary video after episode 2.
I'm going to link your YouTube video about in the show notes. So everybody should check that out. Kingdom, I think, was interesting because you did a commentary after the second episode with some thoughts and predictions on how the rest of the show should go, not necessarily where you thought it would go. But that was one of the reasons I wanted you on today, because I think you echoed a lot of my feelings, and I think they hit it pretty well.
Yeah. I also would say that the last episode is my least favorite of the series.
Yeah.
Good, but not necessarily the home run that wanted.
Mm-hmm.
But
I thought episode 5 was that home run, though.
Yeah, episode 5 was fantastic. And one of the things, let's get into the whole thing before I start citing specific scenes and minutia.
Well, so actually, weirdly enough, I'd like to start with Katya or Wayne as the white members of the panel today. What were your feelings on the show as a whole?
Overall, I liked it. I guess I watched it mostly as Captain America 4, just an extended version of that. Different levels than, WandaVision was its own thing, and I didn't bring those expectations to the show. I expected a far more linear narrative, more traditional Marvel superhero movie, and that's what I got. I was surprised at some of the overt political directions they took. I guess I shouldn't be, being a Captain America story. But I was pleased to see them dealing with this stuff as overtly as they did. As a comics fan, I was happy to see them bringing in so many references from so many different eras of Captain America and trying to weave that into a narrative whole that works in the MCU. So yeah, once again, it's not my favorite thing I've ever seen on TV, but I thought it was a solid addition to the Marvel mythos that they're building.
Yeah, kind of similar. It's like I enjoy it as a Marvel thing. We've talked about on the show how I think Marvel is kind of its own, it has its own scale of judgment of what makes a good Marvel movie or a good Marvel TV show versus another TV show. I think I am also the token not comic book person on the show, I think, today. So I think I'll probably a lot of the references to things. I recognize some things just from hanging around Mav and Wayne and them talking about the series. So okay, I knew some of the points that weren't necessarily from the MCU itself. I think for me it was just, and this is not just Falcon and Winter Soldier, but this is also just Marvel. Is I love that basically Eastern Europe and collectivism is always the bogeyman, or is often the bogeyman, automatically. And I'm yes, I know, especially in Captain America storylines, that make sense because America and Soviet Union kind of stuff. I don't know. If I shut my brain off, I enjoy it. I think the politics of it for me, especially not having the context, I'd be curious to know how people reacted to the politics of the show because who have more context about how the comic book story is. Because I feel like it was very, it was very muddled to me.
Yeah.
Because I don't know, because it was trying to do something of sort of maybe the bad guys aren't actually the bad guys and the system has created them, but it's still Captain America and it's still American nationalism with Spanx on. I saw a comment someplace, and I think this is true, is in any narrative like this, when you have the stuff the Flag Smashers were selling, their point of view, and Sam says this later in the series, right?
I don't disagree with your point. I disagree with your methods. They do this whole thing. This actually sounds reasonable and it's a good thing. And it's something most people out there would be on board with if they really paid attention. But because we're setting them up as the bad guys, let's make her a mass murderer. We have to make her irredeemable by episode 2. Or people are going to relate too much to the bad guys.
And especially because basically the reason that they're upset with her is because collateral damage. Have they seen a superhero movie?
Well, wait a minute. Is it collateral damage if she purposely blows up a group of government work?
Right.
Yeah. I agree with pretty much everything everybody said. I liked it. I understand the politics of it. Katya, you said, not knowing the larger Marvel universe or Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Sure.
As far as the Marvel comic universe, they crammed about 5 different storylines into this. Legit, like they always borrow from the comics. They borrowed from a lot of comics here. There was some Brubaker stuff. There was some Ta-Nehisi Coates stuff. There was some Mark Grunwald stuff. Grun has been dead for almost 2 decades at this point. Like he's and so his stories were from a long time ago, and some of that made it in here. And there was just a lot going on. I thought it needed 8 episodes, and it was 6. I thought some stuff felt rushed or underserviced. I thought more so than a movie, I liked that I got to know people better. We would not have gotten 2 solid Isaiah Bradley hours out of a Captain America movie. That just was not going to happen. Yeah. And I loved that. I thought the Isaiah story was the heart of this. And, if anything, I wish I could have seen more of it rather than just him recollecting. But that maybe there's a future series in that. And then the second thing that was my most favorite was Sam's sister Sarah and her side story that was going on, which would have been 2 minutes of a movie, right? Like, so getting to see that kind of stuff, I really enjoyed. I really enjoyed a lot of the talking. This episode 5, they get the fight out of the way in the first 5 minutes, which was a great fight. It was really nice to see. But then we had 45 solid minutes of character building that really, for me, ended the series. I was on last week I was on There Was an Idea, our friend Tara's show. She was on our WandaVision show, and she had me on to talk about that episode, which to me felt like the finale of the story of Falcon and Winter Soldier. And then episode 6 was all right, now we have to glue this into the Marvel universe going forward. And it felt like the prequel to a movie.
Episode 6 felt like a kind of throwaway. And I feel like episode 6, like that's where it got, like, the politics of it got, like, kind of weird, messy for me, because I think if you like ending with episode 5, it's sort of like I liked it on a note of like shit's complicated, like, and like sort of like we're talking about like disagreeing about methods versus like the actual goals in mind and like how complicated that gets. And I feel like episode 6, like, yes, Falcon has his speech at the end and all that stuff that kind of like ties, like brings that back in. But the actual episode, like the events of the actual episode kind of, I think, ruined that for me, because we still end up back at, I guess because of the end of episode 6, to me, it's like we still end up back at status quo. Yes, he's made this grand speech and they're apparently not going through with the resettlement. But at the same time, like,
there's still millions of people displaced.
Yeah, and the thing I do think that's interesting about that sort of like weird ending piece is it's interesting because had Harley not done what she had done, Falcon would not have had the leverage to prevent the resettlement plan from going through, which I think is interesting.
I want to make sure we get Marcel's view in here, because like you liked the final episode.
I did. So this plays into so many things going on here. So the Marvel TV series, this is my favorite of all the Marvel TV series. I can kind of say that unequivocally.
Okay.
I think that WandaVision was really clever and cute, but ultimately it left me cold with its last episode, because I really, and I presume anybody listening to this episode of your podcast has seen these shows, because if you haven't, I don't know what you're doing, but
why are you here?
Yeah, seriously. But and if you made it this far, well, that's on you now. But,
by the way, spoilers, I guess. Yeah, sure.
This entire show is just one giant spoiler.
So the last episode of WandaVision, I had some real issues with the ethics of the Marvelverse and how they left things off. But in a larger sense, the TV shows, and I realized this several years ago, the TV shows kind of sort of don't matter. And there is this illusion that Marvel has sold us, Marvel, the greater entity, that the TV shows and the movies belong in the same universe, and they do, but the TV shows don't matter. They put all their attention and stuff on the films. So because if you excise every TV show, and I'm talking Agent Carter, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and now the Disney shows, the Netflix shows, if you never see any of those, they have no bearing on anything you see in the films. Now, you will see occasionally things introduced in the shows that migrate over to the films, like Jarvis, for instance, from Agent Carter. Like we see him, and then later we see him in Endgame, and that occasionally happens, but it has no actual bearing versus the other direction where the things in the films have bearing on the shows. Now, with that in mind, yes, I fully expected them to kind of, if not restore the status quo, by the end of any Marvel series show, you go back to the movies. Sure. Now, I just read earlier today that Marvel has plans to continue the Captain America series, the film series. They're going to do it formally a Captain America 4. Now, I've heard the show referred to as essentially the fourth Captain America film, which in spirit, yes, I agree with that. But it's not, because at the end of Endgame, what did we see? We saw Steve Rogers and Sam Wilson, the Shield. So the expectation is he's going to be Captain America. So if you cut to the next Captain America film and Sam Wilson's in costume, you haven't missed anything, really. You've missed the transition, but you haven't missed narratively anything. So I fully expected that.
I have to step in and speak something with Marcel. First of all, the only Marvel TV shows that are quote unquote canon are Falcon and Winter Soldier. And
non-comic book person on the show. It's much easier to sit back and just listen.
Feige has himself said
he word of Godded away everything else.
He word of Godded away Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Because I mean, when Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. was being produced, there was a separation between Marvel Film and Marvel TV.
Right.
So, and Marvel Film did their best to ignore the existence of Marvel TV.
Well, that's exactly what I'm saying.
Right.
Like,
that underscores his point. And I think it will be more moving forward, but I think that's exactly the point. Because I don't want to go into the whole canon versus the... you can wipe them off the board. Yes.
The point is that with the two Disney Plus series, that they are meant much more directly to connect to the films. WandaVision is like a prequel to Doctor Strange 2, Multiverse of Madness. Falcon and Winter Soldier is a test run for a Captain America 4. And I don't know what's going to become of Black Panther they're still planning a Black Panther 2.
They're in pre-pro.
But what becomes of that series? Will there be a 3 considering what they've lost?
But I don't think the TV shows matter to the films. You
think you can skip them. I see what you're saying. You would know if you didn't know the backstory of Falcon Winter Soldier, and if you didn't know it existed, you could move from Endgame presumably to.
Sure. At the end of Endgame, Steve hands him the shield. If the next thing you see is Captain America 4 and he's wielding the shield, then you probably don't need the intermediary step. But my point was more of it's apples and oranges, considering they've wiped away any semblance of canon between the ABC TV shows and certainly the Netflix shows.
And at some future point, they can do the same thing with these. So
they could, Well,
but you have to also, like, media lives perpetually. So whether a thing is canon or not canon, and this is a holdover from comics themselves, we're dealing with all media all the time. And this is why things get referenced again and brought back. Marvel itself has introduced the concept of multiverses. That way you can still legitimize, so to speak, any previous iteration of characters. We've seen DC already doing this. DC, I think that has historically been one of DC's strengths, is they embraced multiverse concepts, and they really done that with their TV shows and films. But to go back to what you asked and referenced, like, for me, episode 6, well, first of all, if Falcon and Winter Soldier, the series, is essentially one long narrative with convenient breaks for us to earn a living.
For 7 days. Yeah, sure.
Right. It's still structured more or less like most Marvel stories are structured, where you have the big fight at the end. But what made it for me, and I agree also, episode 5 was really strong. I've read and heard people reference that Sam's voice in the series seemed comparably kind of passive, and I think there's legitimacy to that. Mm-hmm. In episodes 5 and 6, it pivoted to being far more Sam's story. And so you get the embracing of him in the role, but also him making Bucky come to understand that he didn't just set that shield aside for no reason. He had reasons. And so this is episode 5 to me is him communicating to the world, look, this is why I have not done this thing and I am valid in it. And conversely, it's also Bucky understanding it. So if you have that conversation and Sam ultimately makes that choice, and he talks about that overtly in episode 5, like I'm free to make the choice that I want to make. You're free to make the choice you want to make. We are free to be our own people. We have to see the choice. Like from a narrative perspective, we got to see him in action as Captain America at that point. And we got to see him confront, which has been the threat that's been laid out. But also it was the speech. Like for me, that speech, and it was heavy handed but it was meant to be, because my thinking when he was in the middle of it was Steve Rogers could have given a speech like that. It would not have had anywhere near the weight that it did coming from Sam. So you have to have that moment where you see him kind of declared, like, this is my stance as Captain America. This is the stance of your first Black Captain America. So I would have felt it was incomplete without that episode.
I will agree on that. So the thing that I liked most about episode 6 is, how it ends up is the heavy-handed and corny speech, which is what Captain America is for, right? And I don't mean that. Yeah, I said that as an insult.
Captain America, right?
I said that as an insult, fully intending for it not to be an insult.
Yeah,
that's how you Captain America. And what made it work for me is two things. I think he was Captain America-ing well. Yeah, sure, you can punch stuff and throw a shield, but he goes out and he gives the speech and he does two things that work for me. One, he explains for public consumption as opposed to for Bucky's consumption. On episode 5, it's him trying to make Bucky understand, look, here's why I turned the shield down. Let me try to explain this to you in ways in which you can understand what this means. And to Bucky's credit, my favorite moment in the entire series is in episode 5, where Bucky sits down and says, look, Steve talked to me before he did this, and neither he nor I knew what it would mean to hand that shield to you. And I'm sorry. Like that was brilliant, because for me, that was, and again, I talked about this on There Was an Idea show. That is a moment where Bucky is sort of modeling racial understanding in the most progressive way he possibly can. He's some dude who was born in like 1910 or whatever. He has he cannot really conceptualize what it's like to be a Black man growing up in 20th century America, but he knows that his friend can. And he says, I don't understand this, but I appreciate you. So I'm sorry. And by the way, Steve, Captain America, didn't understand it either. So that moment works for me. What worked in episode 6 was, even though the world doesn't see that speech, he's got the callback for it. And he says, I'm a Black man. People are going to be mad at me just for having this suit on. Which I don't know that the Marvel fans in general, they're pretty on board with it, just because, but like in a real world, absolutely. Oh my God, Captain America's a white guy, which is what happened when they did it in the comics in the first place. There was pushback. So I understood that. I appreciated that. And what I appreciated even more was when the senator says to him, you don't understand. This is complicated. We can't just do that. And he says, I understand. I'm a Black man living in America. Of course I understand. I don't have a solution. You figure it out. My job's to fucking punch people. Like, I'm Captain America. I'm doing my part. He's like, it's supposed to be hard. He's like, I get that it's hard. I have no solution for it. You figure it out. And that's not something that Steve Rogers, the white Captain America, ever said. Like, I like that Sam embraced his he's like, I don't have a solution to this problem. It's we all have to work together for this problem. So that's the part that I liked about episode 6. It was neat seeing him, how is he going to fight differently than Steve, integrating the wings, all the fighty stuff was kind of neat. But I thought that speech is what made episode 6 work at all. Yeah. And I think and I agree with Marcel in that I feel like that tied a bow around the entire series. Well, like it's the ending.
It sold it to me better than the comics did. I mean, Mav, you and I talked at the time, like, the problem I had with Falcon becoming Captain America in the comics is here's this character who has had his own established identity for 40 years, but he's only been in training to take over the white guy's job.
Mm-hmm.
And I know it was more than that, and that's a gross simplification.
No, I think it's right. I will link in the show notes the blog that I wrote back at the time when the comic came out, because I was against Sam being Captain America for non-racist reasons. I didn't like how the comics treated it like nothing that he'd done for 40 years as Falcon matters as much as being backup Cap. And I hated that.
Yeah. But the show, I thought, sold the idea. We saw the development much better. To me, the show sold it, and I was absolutely fine with it in ways that I wasn't when I read it in the comics.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I thought it did it better. Mm-hmm.
We have something in the MCU that we don't have really in comics, which is mortality. So they have to introduce that, like with the idea of Steve Rogers aging, being old, and Tony Stark dying. Now these characters, it's a real universe. You don't have the luxury of reboots or just what Marvel has traditionally done in the comics, which is glossing over aging. Now you have to address aging. And Sam Wilson, by taking on this mantle, he is the first true legacy character in the MCU. Iron Patriot, James Rhodes, like he is Iron
Man-ish, but not the same. It's not the same. Yeah.
The way I look at it is like he embodies Iron Man's physical power, whereas Peter Parker, Spider-Man, he embodies Tony Stark's intellect and responsibility. So like the two of them together kind of are the legacy they inherit the legacy of Tony Stark and Iron Man. But this is like the real deal. This is like somebody actually taking on a mantle. And we saw that with the public season. I love that little moment, where they had to call back to the Black Falcon, and the one guy just looks at him. And of course, it has to be a black man who does this, who looks at him and says, no, that's Captain America. And like, to me, like, there it is. Like, that's the grace note that had to have. But it's about mortality as I see it.
That's one of the other reasons I didn't buy it as well in the comics, because like, okay, give this 6 months to a year, Steve will be back. So, no matter what he was, I always felt like this is a temporary patch. So, yeah. Well,
and that was my thing. It was a temporary patch. I think I said at the time, no, Captain America is not Sam Wilson. Captain America is not Steve Rogers. Captain America is Chris Evans, and the comic will reset before there's another movie which is exactly what happened, because we've got to sell this other film. We've got to capitalize on it. That's not an issue here. Chris Evans, he may come back, but he doesn't have to. And what Marcel just said, the mortality of it, the realness of having to work with actual actors, the realness of the fact that in real life, Chadwick Boseman died. He's just gone and we can't have him back. So the movies need to find a way to address that, the meta narrative around what the MCU is in order to keep it viable.
Am I the only one who watched that speech at the end of episode 6 and thought, come on, bullshit? Nobody's gonna. Nobody in a position. Nobody in a. No. Hold on. Wait. Loved the speech. Loved what he had to say. Then we cut to a scene where they're talking about how the GRC has reversed course, and all I could think is bullshit. I don't care if cartoon birds and musical notes visible to the human eye flew out of Sam's mouth. Do you really think that once the cameras are off, they're going to do anything differently than what they wanted to do?
I had the same reaction where, like, I mean, part of it is also, like, I approach this TV show as, like, Captain America is probably my least favorite, like, Marvel character. So I think that also, like, I appreciate the cheesy speeches. I also, it like, for me, it's an eye roll thing, even though I understand it's part of the character. So I appreciate it on that level. But yeah, that speech is like, I think the most charitable reading I have of that is you have to assume that the speech was maybe the tipping point. It wasn't the reason. Like, because I mean, the actual thing, like, this is kind of what I was saying earlier, like, had there not been this terrorist organization, whatever, basically like about to kill all these people, there would have been no pressure. So like the way that the show presents it as basically like Sam's speech is what changes everything is like, even I don't know that the show presents it as that neatly. And it's not, I don't know.
Yeah, so we have the real life of, people whose life were on the line in the insurrection. Still not calling it an insurrection, still saying and supporting the same dumbass things they did before.
Yeah.
Rhetoric doesn't always win the day. But once again, that's kind of the beauty of fiction and narrative. I mean, this is as real world as they try to make it, it is at its heart meant to be heroic fiction and the good guys win. So,
but I guess the question is, did the good guys actually win?
Yeah.
So there's a weird dichotomy in the way that this show in particular presents its motivations that I think it's very specific to Falcon and Winter Soldier and not so much the rest of the MCU shows or films. The MCU is very good at having complex villains with quotes around it. What made Carly and the Flag Smashers work is that morally, I am 100% on their side. They were absolutely right. Her argument is, look, the world came together to deal with this crisis. And now that the crisis is over, as far as I can see, the GRC's only plan is let's go back to making things as sucky as they were. Why? Why would we want to do that? Now, again, and then you're supposed to go, yeah, she's morally right. I mean, Sam says you're morally right. I agree with you. I disagree with your methods. So it allows her to be a complex character. I also, interestingly enough, the key moment for me with John Walker's character was he, during his court-martial scene, is absolutely right. He says, yeah, you trained me to be a killer. You sent me out there to kill the bad guys. I did my job. I did it well. And now you're mad at me. He's 100% morally correct in his. Now, I mean, do I want to be a killer? No, but what he's saying is his point is 100% valid. Yeah. And I agree with him. So the show got these major character, even the villains in scare quotes, it got their motivations right. Where it falls down a little bit is the motivations of the non-characters, the world at large. So for exactly the reason Kingdom was just saying, will you have can one speech change the mind of, I mean, it's called the GRC, but essentially the UN or the US government? Just give up capitalism, give up borders, like that would be hard. The one that struck me even earlier in the series was episode 2. Episode 2 is when we see John Walker's first press conference where he walks out. They stick him in Yankee Stadium or where the fuck he was. They stick him in this big stadium and let him sit on the ground and give this speech about how proud he is to be Captain America. And everybody's cheering and going, yay, yay, new Cap. And I'm thinking, did you look at the internet ever? Because in real life, you can't replace the quarterback on a football team without people in the crowd being boo, fuck you. There is no way that you got, and forget a black man. You can't just stick another white man in that suit in the real world and expect everybody to just sort of buy in.
Well, they did take him to that stadium is his high school football stadium.
Which I'm sure was also in reality, that would have been a heavily curated audience.
Yeah.
That scene I buy actually, because that would have been a carefully orchestrated, everybody would have been coached on what to say when, including the people on the stands, because it's a media circus. Yeah. It's not an actual genuine event.
So sure, it's a MAGA rally, but every MAGA rally, they have to throw somebody out. Even at Trump's ridiculous things, there's always somebody in there where they have to, damn it, we got to get it. And they will yank them out. So I wanted to see a little bit of somebody not on board, and maybe that happened and we just didn't see it. Maybe it really is that curated and we didn't see it. But I wanted to see a little bit of disagreement, a little bit of people being, I don't trust this new Cap from the beginning, other than just Sam and Bucky. Because Sam and Bucky, of course, you don't trust them. You're friends with the real guy. You guys don't count. You're not impartial. I wanted to see it be a little more complex, and the world of regular people is very simple in this world, and then the complex emotions belong to Bucky, Sam, Sharon, Zemo, Carly, John. They're the ones who will get all the complex things to do. And that's sort of by design, I think, in order to have the heavily didactic narrative, because that's what Captain America is in some ways. This is probably more true to the way. I mean, not that this means anything to film only fans or even modern comic book fans, but this is the world that Mark Grunwald wrote, back in the 80s. Cap deals with complex stuff in a world that wants to be simple. And so I'm okay with it. I just don't know if it played 100% perfectly. And I'm getting, and I need to I need to turn on critical analysis brain in order to see it. And it leaves me feeling uneasy in a few ways.
Question, genuine question. To what extent, though, is that the limitations also of the MCU itself? Because, I guess, especially as someone who doesn't know the comic book lore in the way that you guys do, I don't know that I go to a Marvel movie expecting that kind of level of nuance, because that's not what that genre excels at, if that makes sense. A superhero movie, to me, seems to require some level of there are good guys and bad guys. And I think the interesting thing about the show is that it does try to complicate that a little bit, which I think is why, Wayne, I don't know that I don't think the good guys actually necessarily won, because I think in this particular version, there's not really good guys.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, I thought WandaVision did do that complication. I thought Captain America and the Winter Soldier, the film, did that. We're not talking, this is not a, 2,000-page novel. I think it did it better than this did. Sure. Let's put it that way. And I think even Captain America and Winter Soldier, and even the last two Avengers movies, I thought they had more nuance of regular people in a way that this didn't.
Well, and you're talking to scope now, and I think that's fair. And to just step back for a little bit, in defense of the result of Sam's speech, there's a couple things here. One of them is scope. We don't see the vibe of people on the street. This is not most of these movies, these TV shows, they're not like the comic series Marvels. We don't get the average person's responses to these big events or an aggregate of that even. That's really not, we don't get that. And because we don't get that, we don't have a sense of what was the pressures on these politicians following Sam's speech, because they're not operating in a vacuum either. Because of the scope of this series, we don't get an aggregate of how, the person on the street feels about what's going on and what they feel about this. So there's far more going on as far as the politicians themselves go, pressures on them, than we are privy to. So when Sam delivers that message, they have to take into account the weight that he carries in that world. And also, we're talking about scope. I want to acknowledge something that I do think this series did well, which is the series, all of Marvel's MCU, they have to normalize a fantastic world. And Falcon and Winter Soldier it reframed the dynamics of the MCU by showing real world ramifications of these, fantastic events that happen in the films, specifically the blip. Because we don't know what it's like to live in a world where half the population died and came back. So if Sam, psychologically speaking, there was a lot more going on there than just Sam making a bombastic speech or a heartfelt speech, because I believe it was genuine to his character, which is,
I agree.
So, but it's more than just him making a speech and they go, oh, well, let's do this instead. It's speaking to the collective psychology of half the planet. And this is the real world. So in the real world, does it work? No, because we live in this real world. We don't live in that world. So in that world, as closely as it may mirror ours, there's some things I feel like we just kind of have to give them. And that's one I would I don't know what it's like to live in a world where half the people died and came back. And now people are fighting for, their space in a whole other context than we do now. It mirrors it, but it's not exactly the same. So that's where I can give them that one. I think that's possible. Is it likely? I don't know. I think that part's kind of just up to whoever's telling the story.
I do want that story, by the way. And this is an aside, because I agree with you. And I think since the end of Endgame, we've had one movie and two TV series now. We've had Spider-Man and we've had WandaVision and this. And each of them has hinted at ramifications of the blip, but nobody's really deep dove into it. The most we've gotten was the Monica Rambeau specific episode of WandaVision. And then a little bit here where the banker explains to Sam in, I think it's episode 2 or 3. I'm not sure. Maybe it might even be 1. Is it 1? Okay. Yeah. Where the banker explains to Sam, dude, and yes, there's some racism going on there too, but the banker has a legitimate point of, I don't know how to give you a loan. You have 5 years of 0 credit rating. There's no, and I understand the guy's point, even though, he's being a jerk about it. It's like, yeah, but can I get your picture? He's being a jerk about it, but that is a legitimate concern. I don't know what to do here. There's no textbook for this. There's no, they didn't teach me this in banker school of what you do for a guy. But I do think
literally save the planet.
Right. Yeah. But I do think there are analogs of this in real life. So no, I don't know what it's like to live in a world where, half the population disappears and then comes back. But there are people who were prisoners of war for like 5 or 6 years and then come back and have to pick up their life. And I think that there are interesting stories that you tell that, in real life, a guy is captured by enemy soldiers, and he spends 5 years in a POW camp, and then he comes back and he has to pick up his life, but the world's moved on. And we got a taste of that here.
First season of Homeland.
Right.
Actually, Mav, you just made me think. I think we have a closer an analog to that and what Sam did in the speech having an effect on policy in our real world right here. And that's what Jon Stewart did testifying in front of, the hearings in Congress about how 9/11 responders were treated and the benefits they were getting. Like, to me, that's it. Like, it does happen. Like, sometimes if someone is willing to be public and to give a public voice to collective opinion, and they do it just so, there's such specificity to that. Like, I liked that Isaiah Bradley said to Sam, I have to admit, you're special, because he is, the idea that not just anybody could walk into his role, do what he does and say what he says and try to have an effect, but the right person at the right time. But he took that on because he felt like this is this right thing to do. It would be immoral to not give them the voice. I'll lend my profile to this cause, and hopefully there's enough people out here who believe what I believe.
Sam says his power is optimism. He's just trying to do the right thing.
Right.
I'm sitting here and I'm thinking about something. We go back and talk about the banker and talk about, the world during the blip. And I realized that the world we're seeing now, post the blip, after the snap, the world we're seeing after the blip is ridiculously clean. Like, even what we see of these GRC camps is orderly. Okay, and let me posit a couple of things about what would have happened after the snap, and tell me if the world after the blip would be anywhere as tidy as
that's what I was going to ask her before. Yeah.
Okay. So I used to have a recurring fantasy while driving through rush hour traffic of I wish that every other human on the planet would disappear. And then I realized that's not going to help my commute, because then I have to move several 100,000 cars off the highway by myself. After the snap, the auto industry would collapse, because why would I buy a car when there are thousands of free cars sitting around with the keys in the friggin' ignition? Here's my car. And who's to stop me? Who's going to stop me from the real estate industry? A lot of capitalism collapses like it's the Walking Dead, and we just got rid of the last zombie. Now there's just whatever you wanted is just laying around. If Nicolas Cage turned to dust, I could walk into his mansion and steal all his comics. Whatever I want is there. I just have to brush the dust of the previous owner off. Okay? So when you suddenly have 4 billion people reappear, you've had 5 years to adjust to a new normal, and then 4 billion people reappear. How?
That's the show. Well, that's the show I want to see, right? Because we got a taste of it, right? We got Far From Home, or we see. We unblip, and then there's the band in the middle of the basketball field, court, and that's funny, right? And we see a little bit of the chaos that happens when Monica reappears in the hospital, and there are just people. Oh my God, where are all these people who disappeared 5 years ago coming from? And then here in Falcon and Winter Soldier, we see the banker have 2 minutes to explain how capitalism has changed.
Yeah,
but that's it. That's all he gets. The question that I have is, and it's born of Anthony Russo has a cameo in Endgame where he's playing a man at Steve Rogers' Survivors, support group, and he says, okay, so I started dating again, and I went out on a date, and it was weird because all I did was talk about how much I miss my husband, right? Like that's, and so like, that's interesting. I want to see that. But moreover, now that guy's been mourning for 5 years, right? I love my wife, but if she were to die tomorrow, I can't guarantee that I'm not with someone new in 5 years. 5 years is a long time, right? I'm not saying I would be, but I'm not saying I wouldn't be either.
I'm glad you said 5 years. I thought you were really going to indict yourself.
No. No, but like
if I were to kill Steph tomorrow,
right. Well, but that 5 year gap's important, right? And I have to
and
believe,
you don't know that people are coming back. As far as you know, they're dead.
As far as I know, she died, right? Like in a horrific world-ending accident where I now have lots of trauma, as do so many other people. So it's entirely possible I bond with that over somebody. With that. And I'm thinking there's a world where someone got vaporized, right? In the snap. And then it's 5 years later, their spouse has now, it took 2 years of grieving, but they've moved on. They've remarried. They have new kids, there's a whole world that has developed where, you died as far as I knew. I couldn't live in that house anymore. So I moved to the other side of the country to start over. So now you reappear in this house and I'm gone. Right. Like I'm wondering if Hawkeye will deal with this. Right. Because Hawkeye at the end of Endgame, the Hawkeye we saw is just getting his call from his wife and like, oh my God, we're alive and everybody's happy. But like, he's a different dude. He's had 5 years of murder to, can she just, for her, yes, I realize it's instant. But for him, is he even the person who was in love with her 5 years later? He's a different guy. And I would like to see that explored.
There's also, the thousands of people who were on airplanes when they disappeared. Yeah. And then reappeared and plummeted to their death.
Yeah. The Russo brothers.
But you know what?
Like, they said, oh, well, the snap made them appear on the ground. And I'm like, that's kind of bullshitty.
No. Actually, I'm going to give them this because they all reappeared, but it doesn't mean everybody reappeared exactly where they were at. Yeah. Because you had somebody actually you have a person doing this thing.
I guess
that was my first thought because the little bit of this we saw of Spider-Man was them reappearing where they disappeared from.
Yeah,
all the weird fantasy stretches of the Marvel universe. That one I'm willing. I take that one.
I'm willing to accept that.
Yes, people can fly.
Banner making the snap thinks to himself the words "safe and sound."
Yeah,
right.
What I feel sorry for
you get a no-prize kingdom.
What I feel is I want that empty envelope. What I feel sorry for is all the people who were on planes when their pilot got snapped.
Right.
They're not coming back.
Yeah,
they didn't die. They didn't die in the snap. They died after the snap.
When the plane,
those people
we saw that.
are still dead.
There'd be and you think about how that plays out. I mean, think of people in the middle of surgery and your surgeon is gone, or just like all these things. But we're never who knows? Like I'll never say never because I don't know the whims and wishes of
the great God Feige.
Yes, exactly. Yes, but I will say we will probably never see all the dirt of that because that doesn't. It's owned by Disney, so they're not going to give us that. Although that'd be fascinating if somebody else, some other media thing, did their own take on what that would be like. That would be a fascinating thing to explore. Like, what would it be like to come back to a world that has moved on?
So you're asking for fanfic now, and
really, I'm not.
Nobody asks for fanfic.
I
just
disagree.
Fanfic appears like blades of grass through the cracks of a sidewalk.
Wow, that sounded pretty.
That was too poetic for fanfic. I need to break it to you.
I support all of our listeners who enjoy fanfic, and please leave us a 5-star review.
And write your fanfic in this a 5-star review. and we will
leave us a 5-star review as penance for writing fanfic.
Because of the poetry, I want you to write your fanfic in iambic pentameter. I want a sonnet to those lost in the blip.
Wow. We're off the rails a little bit. I do want to say, though, I do think that this show did address it. Not as much. I'm dreaming of this show without superheroes, where we just follow the life of Anthony Russo's character. Like, I want to see, what his life is now that his husband's come back and he's moved on. And,
a lot of him crying, apparently.
But I do want to see that drama. But what I love about this show, about Falcon and Winter Soldier, more so than WandaVision, even, because WandaVision, we didn't really see much of it. It was hinted at. But here we really see that the world moved on. There are ramifications. Sarah, Sam's sister, says to him, look, I was a single mom. I didn't have a husband. I didn't have a brother helping me out. And I raised these 2 kids on my own, and I don't blame you. It wasn't your fault that you were gone, but you were gone. The world changed and you were gone, and I just had to make shit happen. And I
got used to doing it for 5 years.
Right. Yeah. And what I love about this iteration of the MCU, when Avengers 1 happened, right? Avengers 1, the world learns that there are aliens. The aliens come and they attack New York City and destroy it. And by the next movie, no one really cares. And this is something that happens in comic books all the time, right? Sometimes Galactus comes and tries to eat the planet. The Fantastic Four beat him, and then the world moves on. And in real life, it's 2021. It's been 20 years and we're still talking about 9/11, right? Like that's like that. So if the world sees aliens, this is all anybody should talk about ever in a real world. And that appears to be the case with the blip. The blip seems to have gone, yeah, this changed things and we've just got to deal with stuff now.
Yeah, I remember reading a comic when I was young, like the first time that really hit me, where I believe it was the Avengers, because my memory tells me it was Tony Stark. And I don't remember what they were confronting, but it was some big alien thing. And Tony's like, dear Lord, I've never seen anything like this before. And my 12-year-old brain says, I did in Iron Man 2 months ago. What are you?
Yeah.
Like for all your continuity, you're trying to sell me on this idea that this is surprising to you. And it really shouldn't be.
And that happens, but that's part of the conceit of it. Like, there's a conceit of, I mean, this even makes fun of, there's a conceit that happens in it. And this show even makes fun of it, where Sam's like, androids, aliens, and wizards. And Bucky's like, there's no such thing as wizards. And Sam's like, a fucking wizard. And like, Doctor Strange is a sorcerer. A wizard is a sorcerer without a hat. And that was brilliant, because it really did. Like, I've seen it's a problem in superhero media, not just movies, but the comics as well. The Marvel universe, the fact that the god Thor walks the earth should blow religion apart. Organized religion should have so many problems, because you're like, oh, well, I mean, we thought Christianity, Judaism, Muslim, we thought that was the first, but apparently Thor is just real. And we all know this. So like that should screw things up. Like, people should be like, even if you're saying, no, he's not really a god, he's an alien. Yeah, that's not enough. This guy that they wrote stories about, 4,000 years ago is walking the earth right now. Are
you asking if Jesus would join the Avengers?
I mean, if Jesus shows up walking the earth and turning water into wine or whatever, then Nick Fury should be like, hey, Lord and Savior, I'd like to talk to you about the Avengers Initiative. That's something that should happen. Yes, if he were there,
World War III breaks out.
Right. But if he's not there, if Jesus is not walking the earth, visibly, but Thor is, then that should have ramifications in the world. And it feels like the blip is something where they're at least testing the waters of dealing with these little things. Like Aunt May in Spider-Man Far From Home says she woke up. I mean, she reappeared and there was a new family living in their house, so they live somewhere else now. And I do want to see that stuff dealt with, which is it at least feels like a lived in world. Falcon and Winter Soldier very much felt like a lived in world.
I want to just make a quick mention of Lamar Hoskins' Battlestar character, because
it was awesome in the comics and short shrifted here.
Yeah. Although I am glad they included him, I was intrigued at the way they recontextualized him. And, Captain America as a comic series was a thing that as I was growing up, you kind of had an awareness back in the day of everything, sort of, kind of. And, certainly if you collected Marvel and DC, you just sort of knew the landscape. And I would float in and out of certain titles, and Captain America is one of them. So I got to have a handful of issues for a while, and then go away and come back. So I was collecting Captain America when they introduced that character, and I remembered how he came in and he adopted the name Bucky. And then there's a few issues later, maybe about 6 or 7 issues or so later, the character had a conversation with another person, and it was like a black agent. I forget if it was an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. or whatever, but it was another person.
It was like literally he runs into just a random guy who tells him.
He tells him about the historical significance of the name Bucky.
It's based on a letter from the letter column where somebody wrote into Gru in the letter column and said, yeah, you shouldn't really do that with a black character. And Gru took it to heart and he wrote in that scene. So yes, we should explain. Well, I'm going ahead. You should explain to the listeners why this is a problem.
So it was a slur. The word for black people, like the term Bucky was a slur. So, the character immediately realizes, Lamar Hoskins really, I can't use that name. I can't be Bucky. And if we're talking about the significance of names, that's kind of important because, a black man can choose to be Captain America, but a black man had to also choose, I can't be Bucky. And so then he adopted the name Battlestar. So I was very happy to see him in this. It was interesting. Yeah, I do think he got short served. I understand the narrative purpose of what they did with him. And again, the MCU introduces the element of mortality. So you can't expect the more, I'm going to say, tertiary characters to just make it in these stories. But I would have liked to have seen a little bit more. I liked just, I like the conversations these characters have sometimes. I like the idea of a character being asked, would you take the super soldier serum? Yeah, I would. Of course. The ethics behind that, the morals behind it, and just who is this person that they dispatch of really quickly before we get to understand who and what they are and why they made the choices they made, what their allegiance was to the John Walker character. It speaks to also in a grander, what does Captain America mean to people both inside fiction and outside of fiction, and why do we favor the characters that we do? I loved the asides where people referred to the Falcon as Black Falcon, and the conversations that's mirrored that I've heard and been in the real world. There was a fascinating Twitter post from the actor Desmond Chiam, who's in this. He played, I'm trying to think of the character's name, Dovich, one of the Flag Smashers. And so in this post, and I'm just going to try and summarize it real fast. He's Asian, but I believe he grew up in Australia. His favorite character was Captain America growing up, and he says he just loved what that character embodied, and that was his character. So being on the set of Captain America was like his dream. And so he had posted on Twitter. He talked about this at length, and he posted a picture of him holding the shield. Well, apparently when this happened, there was a crew member who was also Asian, and I'm paraphrasing. I hope everybody just looks it up because he says it much more eloquently than I do. But he asks this crew member to take a picture of him holding the shield, which he does. And as this person is taking his photo, the actor is telling them about his love of Captain America and what that meant to him in his real life. So the crew member says, hang on a second. And he steps away and he comes back with a big binder. So as it turns out, this person is one of the people in charge of repainting Captain America's shield for the movies, like when the paint chips off and flecks. So that's his job. He opens this binder, and there are samples of paint that they have saved that have chipped off of the shield that they saved for color reference. And he gives the actor one of those chips, and he says, put that, and he puts it in the back of his phone case so you can see it. He says, keep that. Now you've got a piece of Captain America's shield. I thought, my Lord, that hit me so hard emotionally because, I used to teach, I still teach kids comics and comics related art and how to make comics and all this stuff. And a thing that I learned a long time ago was not to make fun of whatever character somebody loves, because that speaks to something so integral to people. I'm actually intrigued whenever I hear who people define as their favorite characters. And, a couple times I had kids just volunteer it. And, you know, it almost made me want to cry because I feel like if you're really listening right, you can hear a lot of a person's life story and their struggles, their whatever, and how that plays out through these characters. Like, why do they mean what they mean? So like hearing like that actor, that person that he loved Captain America that much and he got him through struggles and things. And then he got to be on that show. Like it made me really happy for him. But it also makes me think of Steve Rogers and Sam Wilson. And you know what? We haven't really talked about him as much, but Bucky / Winter Soldier, like what do these characters mean to people both in that universe and outside, and who they inspire just by virtue of being who they are and who sees them do what they do? You know, are these narratives going to be perfect? No, because they can't be, but they're always perfect for someone. And I think that's the thing to remember, you know, like maybe this movie or this TV show, whatever, didn't work for me, but there's somebody out there who took that thing to heart and it's like just changed their life. And you know what, for that, you know, I'm just always glad when I see that stuff being made.
There's a friend of mine in Kingdoms, Sam Panico. I remember watching.
I knew Sam.
Oh, okay. Well, we were watching a wrestling thing once. We were at a wrestling show. We were watching. I think we were watching like an old Royal Rumble. It wasn't even like the more recent. It was just like we were watching tapes. And there's a point where Haku, the wrestler Haku, comes out and like somebody made a joke about you know, well, that's a great surprise, ha ha ha. Haku was never a huge name wrestler. He's a random guy. 30 people were in the Royal Rumble match, and so you just got to fill up the ring. So you just get random people. And Sam pointed out something. He goes, yeah, okay, you can make fun of him, but you have to understand, some kid out there just lost his fucking mind, you know, watching this when Haku showed up, because Haku is somebody's favorite wrestler or he wouldn't be there. You know, he's there. Like they went and got him because they're like, somebody is just like going some kid, because he hadn't been around in a while. He had like left the company. So some kid is at home and Haku shows up and that kid just freaked the fuck out going, oh my God, this is amazing, because and that's what this is all about. And I think that's what Marcel is touching on there. I do want to make sure that we touch on a few of the other characters, though, you know, for that reason, because you know, we haven't talked much about where I think the show lets me down the most is Sharon.
Yeah.
And I part of me really believes that I think her story might have been hurt by COVID stuff, because I know they made adaptations when they were filming this because their shooting schedule just got fucked up by the pandemic. But also, like, I was just so let down. Like when people were like, and it's not that I need this to match her comic book origin. I don't care. I don't care if it matches her comic book story. It's that there was, you know, the big mystery of is Sharon the power broker? Is she working for the power broker? And like when it first becomes a thing in like the second or third episode where it's like I guess this is the third episode where it's like, oh, who's she working for? And you know about this power broker. And I remember going, well, Sharon, I hope she's not the power broker, because if she is the power broker, they're fucking telegraphing it. It seems so obvious that she is the power broker that there must be a swerve. There must be a twist. And there's not. It's just boring. I
fully expected the power broker to be Mephisto.
That would have been better. I mean, I just didn't care by the time we got to the last episode. And like, okay, yeah, she's evil and sneaky. And I mean, at least, I like Emily Van Camp as an actress, so I'm glad she has something to do other than just kissing a dude and leaving. Yay, I guess. But I was just so thoroughly uninterested in her story. And I thought she was doing a good job with what they had. Like the entire part where they're sneaking around trying to find the scientist and she is outside, kicking ass by herself. I thought that was a great scene. And then like from then on, she's just on the phone, clearly manipulating everything. And I'm just like, boring. It was boring to me. So I was wondering how people felt about her. Like she's the only female character of note in the series. And yet I found Sarah, Sam's sister, who is a minor character, far more interesting throughout the entire show.
Yeah, absolutely. Sharon becoming the villain is disappointing to me, just because it just kind of the story just kind of lays there. It doesn't. There's no real nuance or intrigue to it. It's like, hey, you guys screwed me over. I came here. I'm making money, and boom. Oh yeah, I'm also the power.
I guess
you know, and like even that thing at the end of episode 5 where we see her on the phone with Batroc, and it's like, ooh, she is betraying them. But then in episode 6, she's fully helping them. She kills Batroc, which pisses me off because I want to see more Batroc. And
you're that kid. You're the kid who likes Haku. Yeah,
yeah. GSP in that role is amazing. He's one of those goofy comic book characters from when I was a kid that gets a really great upgrade in the movies and TV, and now he's gone. And then, you know, she gets her pardon, she comes out of the courtroom, and all I can think is, well, now she has to call somebody and reveal that she, you know, oh, well, our plan worked, and now I can sell America out from underneath. So it just didn't. There was nothing exciting about it to me. There was nothing interesting about Sharon being the power broker. Like, I mean, I would rather have seen a robot with a TV screen in its stomach with Arnim Zola's face.
And I think what's most disappointing about it is they could have done that and made it at least somewhat interesting. Because like throughout the show, there's these themes of like America makes its own enemies by being shitty to them. And like they could have done something interesting. I assumed some of this was foreshadowing of like for her triumphant return of something, and then maybe she'll get a more interesting character arc. But yeah, it was just kind of like,
Yeah,
I don't know.
I mean, if a shadowy figure in Madripoor had been watching and kicked they got their asses kicked and had to limp out of Madripoor, and then later on we find out that was Sharon. This is, I mean,
I assume there was more.
Straight at it, yeah. To me, they just went straight at it, and her becoming the power broker doesn't ring true to me at all. Somehow, it
feels like really I don't know. Even with the like she's been living in exile effectively and like
still feels forced.
It does feel forced because it doesn't really fit with any. At least it doesn't fit with any character arc with which I am familiar.
Yeah,
she had none. Her arc makes no sense. Her plan makes no sense. She's helping them because she needs to, because the story says, and she's betraying them because she needs to, because the story says. But by the way, she's evil. And why? I don't know. We didn't get around to writing that. But I really do think they wrote it. I really believe that there had to have been more there. So what I know from just like industry buzz and stuff and just knowing real life and following this, following behind the scenes details because it's my job. Right. I know that when they were in production of like the 3rd episode or something when COVID started. They were trying to get it done before everything shut down. But unlike WandaVision, which was mostly filmed in one area, it was like a lot of WandaVision's filmed on a soundstage. So they were able to put COVID protocols into place. Falcon and Winter Soldier was supposed to come out first, but they filmed it all over the world. They really did travel a lot. So they had to cut stuff. And they had to take a break first and figure it out. And then they had to cut stuff. Emily Van Camp, the actress who plays Agent 13, who plays Sharon Carter, she has another job. She has another TV show that films in Atlanta. So she couldn't just go with them places. Like once COVID started, she was locked down in one location and they're traveling around. My understanding is a lot of it's why she's on the phone so much, right? Because she's like filming her scenes for this in her downtime from her other show. And it's just like sort of a lot of, well, we can't fly her out to London or wherever the hell we are. But so we got to film her in Atlanta. What can we do in Atlanta? Well, why doesn't she make a phone call? Yeah. She'll wander around and make phone calls because it's what they were able to do with her. And I have to believe there was more to the story that just got junked because none of it makes any sense. Like she just flips back and forth on a dime. And I'm just like, I don't like, I want to be interested in you. I feel like I should be interested in you, but you're giving me not her, but the story is giving me nothing. to like really be intrigued about, other than okay, I guess she's bad because
reason.
Jilted women get mad at their countries. I mean, like, I'm adding, I don't know. Like, I mean, yeah, because her point in the beginning when she says, look, you know, you got a pardon, I got left out to dry. She's absolutely got a point. Right. And I especially want to know, like, specifically tell me she got hung out to dry and then 5 years went by, or actually 7 years, because for her, she had like a year or two of Cap being on the run. And then she had the fucking blip to deal with. And she's just been hanging around for 7 years, not being able to come home, except that borders went away. So maybe you probably could have gone home. Mm-hmm. Like, there's so many questions that are just unanswered by her that I was like, we need another series for this. And it could have just been like, I don't know. I feel like something went wrong in order to have her be that glaring a hole.
Although that would have also been a lot to fit in 6 episodes that are already pretty
it should have been 8.
Packed. Like,
and they should have gotten rid of some stuff. This was really packed. But you know, I got to see Isaiah Bradley on screen, so which is what this was all about. It was really like, to me, the best parts of this show were, you know, just sitting and watching Sam and Isaiah sit down and have a conversation about what it means to be a black man in America from 2 different generations. And it was the kind of the conversation that I've had with my actual grandfather, right? Like just understanding of, no, we see the world a little differently, and seeing Sam see the world differently from Isaiah and understand that, and seeing Sam have that conversation with Bucky, and even the hokey speech at the end. You know, I love that this was an episode about just sort of contemplating race, and to a lesser extent, or a less successful extent, contemplating nationality. I love that they tried. Like, his conversations with Carly were great. She is phenomenal, by the way. The actress's name, I forgot. Kelly.
Erin Kellyman.
Yeah, Erin Kellyman. I always want to say Kelly something, but Erin Kellyman.
Yeah, she was phenomenal in this. And, you know, so of course they had to kill her off, you know.
Yeah. The comment that one of her people said to her, I never thought I'd believe in a Captain America before, but you are Captain America. That idea that she represented that same kind of thing to those people, to the refugees. She was that symbol that they rallied behind. And that's a very different take on representing people.
That's actually a fascinating thing to look at, Wayne, because Captain America, as virtuous as he is, by definition of the name, you know, like, he represents a nation, which is what this thing was about. And, or at least like the aspirations or whatever. To say that she was their Captain America, you know, we're talking now about people who had no country.
Yeah, right.
Well, and I think that is the thing I found. One of the things I found really interesting about the show is it's very rare that we see like the actual plight of stateless people in popular culture, like, and that being represented in any way other than like as a like charity case, like, oh, how sad, like the idea that people are actually, I mean, methods aside, like people are basically responding to the kind of tragedy of being stateless and all of the things that brings along with it by actually trying to do something about it. And by virtue of being stateless, there is really no legal recourse that they would have. I mean, I think that's one of the things that the show does kind of gloss over. It's like, that is part of why, you know, the UN was formed, and this happens all the time when people become stateless, is actually they often they're often left to do things like that are illegal because they have no other option. And I think that's one of the things that I like the show, I think, tried to kind of get at that, but that's a difficult issue to get. I feel like that's a difficult issue to try and like explain in a way that's narratively compelling in a superhero movie.
Well, and they had to make her. I mean, they had to have her flat out murder people to make her, you know, somewhat irredeemable in the eyes of the audience, because, you know, otherwise
she's just right.
Otherwise she's just right. Yeah.
I was going to say that, I thought that most of the secondary or tertiary characters in the show were really fantastic. I thought the senator was a little bland for what it was. And I'll say again that the depiction of the refugees was far too clean and and tranquil for me.
Yeah, we didn't see nearly enough of their actual plight of what they were living through.
I mean, I think part of that though is like, can you actually do that in a Captain America movie? Because does that not then become an indictment?
Well, I mean, but listen, if the central theme of the Flag Smashers' plight is millions of people in these camps, then an old school building or whatever the hell that thing was that they were in is just too mild, too bland, too clean.
Sure.
When we have actual migrant detention camps operating right now that we have seen, basically big geometric tent cities filled with people who aren't being allowed to cross a border, can't go back. It's a matter of the pandemic not allowing them to film it in the way that they wanted, but it sticks out to me like a sore thumb that this is where the refugees were being housed.
But can you really do that in a Captain America movie?
Listen, would you have not said that Isaiah Bradley's attitude and speeches were something you couldn't do in a Captain America movie?
I think there's a difference, though, between having somebody talk about their experience historically, especially in a way that can be kind of like at the end, the final episode, be like reclaimed as like, oh, well, now we're doing better, as opposed to showing the plight of people who are being like victimized by a national, because, and I say Captain America movie specifically, not Marvel movie, because I think Captain America, even though this TV series complicates what it means to be national, like a national figure and a symbol of a specific nation state, I think it's difficult to basically show a refugee camp, which both in the real world as well as in the TV show, that the United States is complicit in creating.
Yeah, well, listen,
I think this goes because
Madripoor, the Madripoor scenes were dirtier than the camp the refugees were in. So I think it's in for a penny, in for a pound. If you're going to tackle the issue, if you're going to talk about the issue, then
I agree. I don't see that coming out of a Marvel movie.
I don't see
the Captain America movie.
And that's why that's what I'm saying is I'm disappointed by that.
Well, I think that comes back to scope, because also consider, while there are parallels in what happened in Falcon Winter Soldier to our real world, that's not our real world. And, how those people, when you think globally, they even describe, half the population of the world left. So countries were glad to have people come in and fill the void. So you're not talking about refugees in the sense that we deal with refugees in our real world, so we don't know how people who were then, once people returned, post to their life, we don't know how those people who had resettled were handled. Were people taken to camps? Did people have to scrounge on their own? I would imagine the stories would be as varied as all the backgrounds and the places that people came from. Yeah. So I don't, I think we have to be a little careful when we talk about that, because we don't have a direct parallel to what we have. It's just things that kind of allude to what we have in the real world. But Kingdom, I totally hear what you're saying. I do think I think it's a matter of scope, but in the, you could almost have an ongoing series devoted to the nuances of what's happening in the MCU because of all that.
Yeah, they didn't sell me on their plight on a visceral level. It was all
sanitized. It was a little too sanitized.
Yeah. To push back a little bit, I think by using the term refugee repeatedly throughout the show, they are conjuring a specific image about a specific experience that is currently happening. So I think it's a little complicated to just say this is a fantasy universe. It's different. They're using, that you could say the same thing about the way that even Sam talks about the using refugee thug at the end. It is a different universe, but the tropes they're referencing and the imagery they're referencing is very real world.
So we've resolved nothing pretty much. I will say and this is a comment to something you just said, Katya, which is I do think in the history of Captain America comics, when it's at its best, it's always complicating what it means to represent America. I think that's been one of the themes of that book from the beginning, and maybe not so much in the 40s when it was very gung ho, America war effort kind of stuff.
I said at the beginning, from the time Gru took over in the late 70s, Mark Grunwald, who literally saw Captain America as an analog for as an allegory for what it is to be American and deal with the complications of what America is. And you represent America. How do you deal with Watergate, motherfucker?
That was the Steve Englehart run in the 70s.
Was it Englehart? Okay, I couldn't remember when Gru took over.
The Secret Society or Secret Empire storyline was Englehart.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, that was very much a commentary on Watergate and what does it mean to be an American and can I represent America when I've witnessed this? Gru's dealing with like Iran Contra and with Reaganism in the 80s and stuff, and it's a complicated history. There's the advent of what John Walker was I think that's Gru as well. Is Captain America the guy or the suit? And that's the question. I mean, that wasn't about Sam Wilson. It was about Steve Rogers versus John Walker. But what is the important part? Is it the representing America? Because John Walker represents more of what America had become by then. And Steve Rogers wasn't antiquated. Yeah, that fine line between patriotism and nationalism.
So the show doesn't, I don't know if the show resolves anything either, right? It tries, but maybe
I don't know that it really meant to resolve anything, to be honest.
Right. Yeah. Sam Wilson says, right? I don't know how to fix it. I'm telling you to fix it. And that's kind of, or he says, the answer is there's no easy solution. Stop looking for easy solutions. Yeah. We talk about these things and we work on them. And I think that the show does a good job of that. Like our show.
Home of the 5-star review.
Our show and Kingdom show, which is going to be weird because Kingdom, you're probably airing this as your show too.
I wouldn't mind a night off recording. I'm going to swap cast this.
Just change the intro and you're good, right?
That's what he did last time.
No, that's what I'll say this real quick. It's an idea that I got from comedian Doug Stanhope, the Swapcast. Why record two podcasts when we can record one? We can put it on our mutual. We can each put it on our podcast feeds, and hopefully that will help feed listeners on a two-way street. So
we did that a couple times with Danny Anderson. I know.
Yeah. So that said, for the people who are listening on the Vox Popcast feed and not on the Handsome Genius Club feed, where can they find Handsome Genius Club? One of the best 3 podcast logos on the internet, I would say.
Hey, all right.
Whoever designed it was brilliant. There's some great work on the Handsome Genius Club icon.
Don't do me a favor, Mavin. Please don't throw your shoulder out, patting yourself on the back.
I actually did that earlier today. Where can people find the Handsome Genius Club?
They can find my podcast Mondays and Thursdays at handsomegeniusclub.com. It's also available through Apple Podcasts, Google, Spotify, and Stitcher Radio. And there are exclusive Friday episodes on my Patreon, patreon.com/My Name is Kingdom. All my social media that's worth bothering. Twitter, Twitch, Instagram, YouTube, and Patreon.
And Marcel.
Oh, man, you can just find me everywhere.
We'd be here like 20 minutes if you start listing everything you've been on in the last 2 weeks.
That's been great.
He's just omnipresent.
It's weird. Like, seriously, I've actually done that where I've gone in and just like, everybody's, you look yourself up and stuff comes up sometimes. I think that's crazy. Do people know I'm just like a person? I'm just not, I'm not, a thing. But all right. So anybody who does want to look up things pertaining to me, the best places are, of course, there's my own website, marcelwalker.com. There is my blog, which I have not attended to, but I do keep a great running list of media and stuff I've been in there. My blog is thoughtinmind.blogspot.com. I am very, very direct directly attached to the Hutzpah Project. Hutzpah, Superheroes of the Holocaust, the comic book published by the Holocaust Center of Pittsburgh. I'm the lead project artist and the project manager. Wayne is our lead project writer. Yay. So if you look up information about Hutzpah, you'll find us through there. Oh God, what else? And of course, I'm currently the board president of the Toonseum. And if you look up toonseum.org, there's information on me and the organization and our goals. We are a nonprofit promoting comics as a force for social good. So yeah, come or just come find. I'm all over the place.
And Katya,
I don't know. You can find me here, the Vox Podcast things, and on Instagram at just that nerd kid. When I feel like posting, which now it's mostly we've taken a break from sewing and now we build keyboards. So
I did see that you're doing that with your brother or something.
Yeah, I've had a mechanical keyboard for a while, learning how to make them from scratch because the pandemic continues, y'all. Therefore, the pandemic hobbies. I don't want to think about how much money I will spend on keyboards before this is over because it is not a cheap hobby. But I just choose not to think about that, and but it makes a nice noise. So if you heard that the entire episode, that's why.
Wayne, what about you?
Here mostly these days. I still have my blog's still up. I haven't added anything to it in a long time, but there's a lot of back content if people want to read it. It's wayne-wise.com. The Hutzpah project that Marcel mentioned, which I don't think I've mentioned on the show in a long time, so we just don't talk about that as much. But yes, that's not. While I'm involved with it, I'm not as specifically day-to-day involved with it in the way that Marcel is. But yeah, you can find it's an awesome project. You should look it up. I forget my Instagram name. It's in the show notes. Mostly just daily photos. I don't need to know. I just sign in on my phone. Yeah, 20. Yeah. It's not something.
Just go to my Instagram. You can click on through who I follow. It's in
the show notes. You can click on Wayne in the show notes.
I don't need to know it. It's on my phone.
You're Tetrock 2017.
Okay, I knew it was Tetrock whatever date I joined Instagram. I can remember what it was.
Yes.
Oh, that is so sad.
Sure.
Yeah, it is.
You can follow me on Instagram or Twitter or Facebook, all of the places, always at Chris Maverick. You can follow the show, all those same places at Vox Podcast. If you enjoy the show, and we certainly hope you do, then please subscribe to us on iTunes or Stitcher or Spotify or wherever the hell else you get podcasts from. And do us a favor, leave us a 5-star review, especially on Apple Podcasts. That helps other people find the show, makes us more popular, makes other people who we link to more popular. So it will help Kingdom. So you should give us a 5-star review, and you should give Kingdom a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, and then subscribe to both shows, and then we both get more popular, and magic happens because algorithms are cool. And by the way, write a fucking review. Like, don't just put 5 stars. I mean, we'll take the 5 stars, but just take a moment. Click on Apple Podcasts, even if you don't use it right now. Go there, say 5 stars, and then just write a little something. Right? Best show on the internet. Home of the 5-star review. Eugenics are bad. Any of our random catchphrases are fine, but get people to listen. We'd appreciate it. We'd also appreciate it if you subscribe to our YouTube feed, which is linked in the show notes. And then you can see a visual version of the show where you see pictures while we talk about shit. It's interesting. And you can also listen to my other podcast, Gosh Golly Wow there. It's all about content merging and making the world better and, monetizing us. That's really what I'm looking for here. Which doesn't help you, but it helps us. And then we'll keep making the show. That's what you want. Yeah, it does help you. So we'd appreciate it if you do that. I would like to thank Kingdom and Marcel for joining us for this
Thanks,
weird,
guys.
Crazy thing. Thanks.
The sound of me saluting.
Sound of me tipping my hat.
I would like to thank Maximilian of Thoughtform Music for our epic theme song, building ever so more epically and playing us out. I'd like to thank you at home for listening, and we'll see you next time. Bye.